And may I introduce to you the lovely Karen Kennaby. When the light flickers, this is what she's going to be talking about: navigating transitions with grace and grit. I think Noreen might, if she's still around, if the electricity holds long enough and the signal holds long enough, I think this is going to be right up her street. She'll recognise a lot of these things. I'm going to pass straight over to you, Karen. Let's go.
Thank you so much, Jill. Yes, isn't Noreen an absolute living embodiment of doing that? Oh, I got lipstick on my teeth. Let's wipe that off. So my name's Karen Kennaby, and I have been an entrepreneur for 40 years. And so various ups and downs along the way, as all of you who are on that path will know very well. And I really resonate with what Jill's whole ethics and raison d'etre are behind Collaboration Global. The leading from the heart and really coming from a place of love are absolutely integral to everything that I now do. And it's changed along the way, and it's changed through the years in terms of how I have navigated the different ups, downs, and transitions. And so I have just written my first book, which is in a series of 8, called Elevate Book 1, Letting the Light In. And the reason it's a series of 8 and that I know it's a series of 8 is that last year I had a conversation with the man who was to become my book writing coach. And I was talking about the fact that I had, for over 15 years, been trying to write a book. And I don't believe in the word try. Very Yoda-ish. It's either you do or you do not. And so basically I've been failing to write a book for over 15 years. And I've been trying to put too much into it. So because I've got such a lot of experience, I wanted to put all of that in. And then people would say, oh, you need to write about your life story. And I wanted to put a lot of personal development things in. And I also create recipes all the time. I initially trained as a chef, and I create new recipes. I've got hundreds. And I write poetry. So not quite understandably, really, it didn't all fit into one book. So when he said, I think it's a series of 8, my body just went whoosh. And lo and behold, it allowed things to open up and to be able to just let things flow in the way they were supposed to flow. And the whole book came through downloads. And it's called Letting the Light In. But what I wanted to talk about is those times when it doesn't feel as though the light is shining. And over the course of our lifetimes, there are obviously things that crop up, both in our business world and our work world, and also our personal lives. And so I used to be someone who would pick myself up, dust myself down, and carry on. And I did this time and time again. At a very young age, I became deputy manager of a 4-star hotel. And when I say very young age, I was just 22. And so anything that came along, anything that happened, and I got knocked back, I would literally just pick myself up, dust myself down, and carry on. And over the years, I realized that some of the time when I was doing this, I was building up, and I would eventually get sick. So then I would end up having some time off sick, not very much, never allowed myself very much time off sick, went back and carried on. So I was working hard, I was doing what I loved, but I was working hard, and I wasn't allowing myself any time that something cropped up. I wasn't allowing myself to get into, well, why has that happened? And really be kind to myself and actually sit with it. I was just pushing on through. And there are times, obviously, when we have to push, but more and more I'm realizing now that it's much more, it's an allowing. And so even listening to Noreen, and we're talking about, the grit and the determination, and she has allowed herself to listen. And for her, it's been very much, God has been guiding her and she's followed the path. And then she's taken inspired action. And that then allows the path to be so much easier. It is a true example of letting the light in. Thank you. I like my pink lilies too. And believe me, the scent is just insane. It's really, really gorgeous. So I got to the point, a lot of things had happened. I had an event management company, which I started when I was 30. And I grew very quickly to 7 figures. And I had a team of 24 at peak. And we had a great reputation. And so we just grew through referrals. And that was the way that things were flowing through. But over the years, things changed. Something happened with somebody that I'd brought into the business, and I then split the business, which was a challenge, kept on going. And then the whole business environment changed. And so I had grown this with referrals, completely referrals, and relationship building. So I would sit with my clients, we'd have coffee, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm really having a problem with this, Karen." And I'd say, "Well, would you like me to help?" And so I would do something else within the business. So it became much more than just event management. So it grew and grew like that. And then things changed, and it turned around so that procurement departments became the norm. And everything was done by just the lowest the lowest bid. And also the way our clients were interacting with my team, it was a different level. And people were watching their back, the client personnel were watching their back. So the whole element of blame came in, and it changed the whole nature. And I still carried on and I pushed, but the love and the passion for the business had dropped. And that was really the chink in the armor when things started to change. And I brought in a managing director to try and change things. And I did this and I did that. But eventually it got to the point where I had to go into voluntary liquidation. And at the same time, or almost the same time, another business that I'd started, which was fractional ownership of properties around the world, was 2008. And we all know what happened in 2008. And so that business, I was basically ahead of my time. I was very involved with the fractional ownership world in this country and loving being part of it. Very small world. And unfortunately, it needed very much deeper pockets than I had to train accountants and lawyers around the world what exactly fractional ownership was. So that one had to go into voluntary liquidation again. And the combination of the two put me in the situation where I had to go into bankruptcy, voluntary bankruptcy, which involved a huge amount of shame. Nobody in my family had ever been bankrupt. And so it completely shifted everything. No longer was I a business owner. And so that then brought in a new phase, but I was still not in denial, but I was still in a phase where I thought I could pick myself up, dust myself down, and carry on. And so I said to myself that I didn't want to have offices anymore. I didn't want to have employees anymore. And I didn't want this and I didn't want that. And it was all what I didn't want. And I didn't realize that I was focusing on what I didn't want. And so lo and behold, things were a real struggle. And so around that time, I started getting very deeply involved in a personal development and spiritual development journey, um, and completely turned things round and started to embrace the things that I'd been shunning. And what I've realized, particularly over the last 10 years, is that in order for us to move forward with grace as well as grit, and to really have the growth that is sustainable across the whole gamut with our health as well and relationships, we have to be able to fully embrace the aspects of ourself that we don't like. So, really embracing. So, if we've failed at something or we put a label on we've failed at something, really being able to go in and explore what failure means to us. Really going in and exploring what our relationship with money is. Because we all have a relationship with money. And being able to go in and look and see how we label that, look and see where the fears are. And more as I've done this work, not just for myself, but I've been a coach and mentor for over 20 years. And more realizing that when we really embrace the things that we are scared of, that we are fearful of, and we keep going down and down and down, then once we've accepted that, then we can really build on that as a foundation and we can grow. And that's when we can go to the next level and we can really come from the heart, because we can't come from the heart if we're operating from a place of fear. So it really is turning this round and not resisting the fear, because resistance just gives more and more energy to it. And there's a phrase that you've probably heard: what we resist persists. It's so true, because we're putting more and more energy into it. And this, when we look at things on a global scale and we look at the way the media reacts to things, it's not helpful, because if we put a lot of attention onto things that we don't like, we don't want, then we're just feeding it. It's like a fire, we're just putting more and more fuel into it. But when we accept that those things are there and we really embrace it and we go underneath the surface, then we can breathe more. Then we can come from that place of love, and then we can really make the change that we want to be in the world. And what I've come to realize is that when you keep going down beneath that fear, beneath that fear, beneath that fear, it all comes down to actually the fear of death. And we are scared. So when you go down, um, we are scared of being excluded. We're scared of not belonging. We are basically very tribal creatures, and that has kept us safe over the years. So we end up doing a lot of things to be accepted, just to be accepted, and at a cost to ourselves very much, because we are scared of being excluded. We're scared of not being accepted. So we don't necessarily put our heads above the parapet, Because if you look down below, if we're not accepted, if we're shunned by the tribe, and it doesn't matter what the tribe is, then we will die. You know, we're outside this safe perimeter. So everything comes right back down to that, which isn't morbid, it's just being realistic. And once we can be realistic, then we can say, okay, so I fully accept that. And if we can really, I mean, it's going right down into the deep end, but a lot of the work that I'm also doing now is really helping people to accept death more, because in the West we have this really bizarre relationship with death, and we're so scared of it, and we do so much because we're scared of death that we don't fully live. And it's only really when you can embrace the fact that we are going to die that then you can fully live. And I've had some extraordinary transitions over the last 2 years, and they have once again changed how I perceive things. So both my parents passed away in the last 2 years. They were both in their 90s, and Dad was 97 and literally just went. So, you know, really quite amazing. When he did, you know, after obviously the initial shock, what he gave me was an incredible infusion of unconditional love. And I thought I knew what unconditional love was before, but I realized that I knew what unconditional love was in theory, and this was completely embodied. And then 9 months later, when my mother passed away, she gifted me something very different, and I ended up in this transcendent space, which gave me a very different perspective on looking down at how we behave. So really being very open to everything that's coming along. And then as a result of all of that, I left my husband, I left my home, I moved, and I have spent a huge amount of time in these ancient hills that I now live in. I then pressed pause on working with my main business partner. So everything was just cleared away. And I think that was part of how I had the space, mentally, spiritually, physically, to be able to write the book as well. So we do need to find that spaciousness to allow the expansion and to embrace everything that comes along without labeling it good or bad. And when we can do that, then we can really go through all the transitions that come up in our lives. And instead of doing the labeling, we can just go with it and really appreciate that life is flowing through us. So I think I've kept to time, Jill. I hope so.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karen. That's fascinating. Before we go